One sec,
Yep.
Riley. All right, you good? You got audio?
I do, yes.
Okay. All right, good to go. So we were talking about Davis and the contract or no contract to Ben Johnson.
Yeah. They Mark Davis said we never made an offer to him. Found that interesting, but yeah, I do feel Ben Johnson to Chicago was kind of his path all the way through. I think that's where he was headed the whole time.
So I will definitely make this clear, salty pork chops. It's definitely not Ohio State. Definitely not Ohio State. I can tell you that. So why is it saying my stream finished now? What is going on here?
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened. All of a sudden, it was just me on the screen, and then
That is really odd. Because it says the stream finished. And it's literally not there anymore.
Moonscar Blade says we're back. It's a new stream now, so are we rolling?
I don't know. I don't see it. I don't see it. So you got to give
John
me a sec.
Yeah, it says I don't know if these guys see the chat. We do. Hey, Eric Rintamaki's in the building. Lost you. Now it's working on the Senior Bowl link.
The Senior Bowl link.
Not sure what that is. Precision Staining says it stopped and started again.
I didn't start the Senior Bowl link.
Yeah, that's interesting. Scott Young says you're good now. Salty pork chop.
Hold on. I don't even know if people can hear or see us, but that is really weird. It just stopped and it went to the other link.
Yeah, Moonscar Blade, new link. Yeah, Senior Bowl link. Chat, can you see us and hear us?
Oh my goodness, that is weird. All right, let me fix this real quick because
Sure.
I've never seen something like that happen before.
Something new every day, all right?
Unbelievable. Oh,
Give us a moment here, chat, to let Will figure.
yeah. I just
What's
need to
going
get.
on?
I just need to get thumbnails and that switched over because this is definitely not the Senior Bowl.
That's a video that you had scheduled later today. Am I right?
No. That's on February 1st. That's why it doesn't make any sense. How would it just stop my stream and then go to a different link and start going? I didn't have it. I didn't have it in there as a trailer. I didn't have it in there as a continuation stream. Nothing.
Yeah, Trey says that YouTube kicked you on the other live stream, and then this one just started up immediately.
That is weird.
Interesting.
Extremely weird. I'm gonna have to reach out to YouTube today and figure out what the hell's going on.
You've got believers in the chat, though. Jay-Z says if there's a problem, Will's going to solve it. Moonscar Blade, if there's a problem, let the DJ revolve it. I love it.
Oh,
Trey says Senior Bowl watch party was scheduled for the 1st. Well, I guess we're just expediting the process.
Yeah, sorry. I've changed all the titles and the descriptions, so it is now in the that link. I mean, I guess that link's being used now. And I just double checked my internet. My internet's blazing, so I shouldn't be having any issues there. This has got to be a YouTube thing. Yeah, lovely. Yeah, absolutely lovely. So anyway, I don't know where we were, but let's just move on. Free agency trade rumors, which we just lost over 100 viewers. That I mean, they're just gone. I don't know if they're going to refine it or not. Free agency trade rumors. So I've got a big one, and that is going to be Kirby Joseph. And the question is, does it make sense to extend or trade Kirby Joseph? And we're going to talk it out, right? I'm not going to put a hardline stance into this that, you know, we have to do this or we have to do that. We're going to talk it out. I have an opinion, but I want to let the numbers make sense. So I spent an assload of time on this yesterday, way too much time on trying to go through this. But whenever I do topics like this, I try to bring as much factual data as possible, because I'm going to intertwine that with my opinions and what I think would make sense. The one thing that I will say is I think that Brad Holmes loves the guys that he brings in. He wants to see these guys get to a second contract. Obviously, he wants to see them have the seasons that they're having. But at some point, and I've said this for a while, you're going to run out of money. At some point, you're going to run out of options because you won't be able to re-sign everybody. So at what point do you capitalize on an opportunity and trade a player? That's something we haven't seen Brad do yet. Could Kirby be the first casualty? I love Kirby. Want him to be on the team. Think he's great at what he does. But there's some other things to his game that I'm not so fond of. As far as, it seems like he's always late to catch up, on single high safety looks. He's always late on picking which side he's going to cover. And we're letting up 30, 40, 50, 60-yard plays because he's not in position. He's taking a bad angle. Good at ball hawking. Good at coming up in the box and making a tackle in the run game. I think he's a little bit late on his decision-making when he has to make a break right or left to what side that he's going to cover. Does that happen naturally throughout the league? Not as often as what I would hope, because it's more so I believe that it's Kirby that is just a little bit late on the draw. So his PFF grades won't align with that. For whatever reason, he's not getting credited with a lot of these big plays, which maybe it makes sense that the DB, the cornerback is, and Kirby's not. But if it were me making that grade, if it were me making that decision, your safety is the last line of defense. And if he's late to the party, it's his fault, right? But that's a microcosm of what Kirby does, right? That's a small part of the bigger game that he plays and has played. He's only been in the league 3 years, 3 seasons, and he's already reached this level. But I want to talk this out, and let's find out if it's all Kirby or is there another reason. So how many people do we have now, Riley?
Looks like we are mid 40s or so. Yeah, 45. We were at like 130.
Damn. I really wanted to do this segment with a lot of people in.
Yeah, talking about how it switched. It's the weirdest thing that it switched right over to a different link, but here we are. So
all I did is this. I went in. People were complaining about ads, so I went in and I changed it, and then everything shut down. So apparently YouTube doesn't like that now. They want me to leave ads on because they completely shut it down. Or something. I don't know. So anyway, here's my topic of the day. I put a lot of work into this one. So let's talk it out. Kirby Joseph. Turn this ringer off. Does Kirby get traded or extended? And that is going to be my first question to the chat right now. Is Kirby going to get traded or extended? And I want to know your reasons as to why or why not. Your pros and your cons for Kirby. Is there anybody else in the league that you would love to see become a Detroit Lion in this offseason during free agency? Riley, I don't know if you gave it any thought last night as to anybody that you're thinking that could be, in free agency that would be available, right? That would money-wise make sense. If you had to trade for this player and it wasn't a free agent, do the picks make sense? I don't think that happens. I think that if the Lions do anything, it'll be a rookie or a free agent if they're going to replace Kirby Joseph. So have you given it any thought before I get into all this?
Just on a surface level, I will be bringing, as in the coming days, a lot more prep as far as players that could realistically be a fit. What I know is what Brad Holmes said about Kirby Joseph the other day. He fits the culture. He's a big part of the team. And I want to see how he plays under this new scheme with Kelvin Shepherd, first and foremost. But I know you've done a ton of very thorough preparation in this, so I'm excited to hear what your thoughts are and what you've gathered.
All right. Well, first and foremost, I'm just going to read a couple of excerpts here since you mentioned Brad Holmes. And this is what he said about Kirby Joseph in this season, extension or trade, or I'm sorry, just extension. He was asked a question, obviously Kirby Joseph's in line for a new deal. He's, entering his 4th year to be a contract year. What does that look like? And Brad Holmes said this. He said, that's on the docket to be looked at and discussed. He says, we know where he's at from an eligibility standpoint. I don't know why he said that. I maybe Brad's just turning back around on the person that asked the question, like you don't think I know where Kirby is? You don't think that I know he's in his last year? I don't know. I don't get that from Brad. I think Brad's pretty level-headed, cool, calm, collected dude. But then he went on to say this. He said, look, he's an all-pro player this year, right? I don't know how you don't make the Pro Bowl with 9 interceptions, whatever that is. I think we know what that is. But he's an all-pro player. He's another one that's gotten better and better. He's one that has proved he's a Detroit Lion. He fits our culture. It's hard to find ball hawk guys that will tackle how he does. I think that's what makes him unique. Again, we haven't had any intense dialogue about that yet, but obviously you want to keep good players here. From the surface level, as you just, said, it sounds like Brad is going to want to keep good ball players in Detroit, which means Kirby. Kirby fits that mold. He's a good ball player. But this is only year 3. What has happened in the last 2 seasons? Why has Kirby had this meteoric rise from year 2 to year 3? What changed on this defense to allow that is my question. What changed? What was the defining factor for Kirby? Was it all him? Was it him and the scheme? Was it him and the added DB, player, DB room, right? The new DB room? Was it him, the DB room, and DJ Reader? What was it? What changed? So Kirby Joseph obviously entering a contract year after having an all-pro season with 9 interceptions, including a pick 6. Now, as a 3rd-round pick in 2022, Kirby is one of the Brad Holmes gems that has really come into his own and began playing at a high level the last 2 seasons. We have seen his growth on the field, albeit some media controversy has also surrounded Kirby with a couple of hits against tight ends, Higbee and Hawkinson. But I think that if you've done the research like I have, and I've shared the information on this channel, those were legal hits. That's cleat stuck in the turf or the grass that is causing those injuries. It wasn't necessarily the hit or where he hit these players. It's just part of the game. The question now becomes, how do we view Kirby after all that? And this last season, how do we view Kirby? Will he continue to get better? Where is he deficient? And can he become a stable safety year in and year out based on what he just did this season? Because this season, in my opinion, Riley, is an outlier, right? This doesn't happen very often. And matter of fact, it's really never been done where a safety or a cornerback is going to lead in interceptions for multiple years, multiple seasons throughout their career. It's usually a one and done kind of deal. So for people to cling to, well, he just had 9 interceptions, of course we want to keep the guy. And I'm not calling out anybody independently if that's how you feel. I think we have to look a little bit deeper at where he's been, where he is now, what's changed. So I want to dive into the pros and the cons about extending Kirby and what that may look like financially versus other players from a similar comparison standpoint, as well as effect on the team and obviously the cap if the deal is not done, or vice versa if it is done. So my first pro kind of con list here, Riley, is roster. Right now, the Lions have 4 safeties under contract in 2025. They have Branch, Kirby, Hallett, and Strickland. And Brian Branch is on the roster in 2026, and he's the only safety on the roster in 2026. And I thought that I read that, was it Morris Norris was also under contract or had a futures contract or something with the Lions. So we might have 5. But let's be honest here. We really have 2. All right, Kirby and Brian Branch. Those are the guys that we need to worry about. Ifeatu Melifonwu is a free agent.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not super excited about Hallett, Morris Norris, Strickland. Yeah, I'm okay with. He's got a lot of development left in him. But it's next year. We have 1. And that's Brian Branch. And oh, by the way, Brian Branch next season is going to be eligible for a contract too. So that's the first thing that I want to stick in everyone's mind. How are you going to pay Kirby and Branch? How are you going to be able to do that? And is there another team out there that is doing that? We're going to find out in just a moment. What is the impact on the cap? So the 2025 current cap rate is roughly 2.7% of cap value for safeties before the new 2025 cap adjustment hits the Lions cap. So that's a lot of cap, I'm saying there. So 2.7%, right? I mean, that's nothing. When you look at the grand scheme of, the cap, $255 million in 24, the Lions are only spending 2.7% of that on safeties. It's a pretty damn good number. Now, I showed Riley my sheet this morning. So I literally have a spreadsheet that is huge. And I went and grabbed every team, every position, the positional value, how much they're spending, and started breaking it down by a percentage, because that's how you have to look at what a team is probably going to do. So when I say things for free agency, and I say, look, we're just not going to get that edge rusher at 30 million. There's a reason why I feel that way. And that is because I look at the cap, I look what every other team is spending, I look what our team is spending, and then I do the adjustment. Okay, if we're spending 8%, but everyone's spending 11%, what can we get for that 3%? Does it fit? What do we have to lose to, bring in that player? So that's why when I bring my opinions, they usually vet out at, throughout the season. Every year I've said we're not going to bring in a free agent edge rusher that we're going to pay boatloads of money. Hasn't happened. And it's because it doesn't fit the percentage to personnel grouping or positional grouping expenditures on every team across the league. They pretty much follow the same model at every team. So there has to be something said to that, So what's the impact on the defense and the roster? All right, so the Lions cannot have one guy rostered for 2026, right? You can't. You have to have at least 2 or 3 guys. So you can't expect continuity from a defensive standpoint if you've only got Brian Branch rostered for next year. So that's where I would say, okay, Kirby makes a lot of sense because we need this guy to be on the roster next year. So make sure we're still alive.
Yeah, I think we are rolling.
And then the fifth kind of pro and con here is, can Kirby be replaced? And if so, when and with who can Kirby be replaced? So I guess my first question before I start getting into the contract implications and some of the work that I've done, Riley, what is your knee-jerk reaction? In chat, comments later, right? What is your knee-jerk reaction to the Lions potentially extending Kirby Joseph? Do you agree with it? It should be done? Or why or why not? Do you believe it? That it shouldn't be done? And what are your pros and cons that would kind of follow through with either answer? Yeah, I think we should extend Kirby. This is why or why not. What do you think, Riley? Just your knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, I think the automatic answer is just, and you kind of alluded to it, it's like, you can't imagine, why are we even talking about potentially losing Kirby? He just had 9 picks. He's this awesome safety. Everybody loves him. We love his swagger. We love his approach to the game. We love the culture fit that he is. I think that the con potentially here is, as you said, at some point you can't pay everybody. So a lot of this is going to come down to what is he asking for? And it's not reasonable to expect a player that is as young as Kirby is, who's played as well as he has so far, to take any kind of discount. Or if you're Kirby Joseph, even if you're leaving the Lions and you're going to a dumpster fire of an organization, but they're offering you whatever it is, 10, 15, 20, $30 million more, people always say, well, you're already a millionaire. What is that money? That's still millions of dollars. You cannot leave that on the table. I think that Kirby Joseph is obviously a huge part of this team. He's one of Brad Holmes' best draft picks. I'm kind of flying under the trust in Brad Holmes operation here. I think it's going to depend on what his asking amount is. I'd be curious to know if they've already had kind of a discussion to get to what that number would be, what he's thinking. If it's reasonable, I would expect him to lock him up as soon as possible, just as he's done with some of the others, St. Brown, Sewell. But it's going to be what his asking amount is and how he plays this upcoming year. I certainly don't want to lose Kirby Joseph. I think he's an awesome player, and I imagine most of the chat would agree with that.
And I would agree too. I mean, I obviously wouldn't want to lose a player like Kirby Joseph, but at some point you have to make what's called a business decision. And it's what's best for your franchise over the long term. And when you look at the viability of, okay, he just had an amazing season, is that replicatable? The answer is going to be no, 100% of the time. Can he play a commensurate value to what he did in 24? Yes. But do you think he's going to get another 9 interceptions? No. Do I think he's probably going to get somewhere around 4 or 5? Probably at the ceiling. So my second follow-up, I guess, to this would be, how much of Kirby's success has been because of Brian Branch? Do we think that there is a component here that maybe Brian Branch's immediate play on the field as a rookie affected Kirby in a positive way? Now, he was at the nickel position last year. Kirby didn't have 10 interceptions or 9 interceptions last year. But having a guy as solid as Brian in the nickel last year, does that elevate Kirby's play? And then moving Branch back into the safety position this year, did that elevate Kirby's play? And I guess to go along with that, how much more of that was affected by the fact that Carlton Davis was pretty much locked down, did very well. And then Amik Robertson, another one that had a crazy good season in spurts. So we leveled up the DB room. And then it just so happens that Kirby plays out of his mind. So that's where I drive some of my opinion and narrative to, I don't know if I want to sign Kirby to a long-term deal. Because what I'm seeing already in Brian Branch is a Hall of Fame career in the making. And that is a guy that we have to keep around. Absolutely. One of the hardest hitters, pretty sticky, very smart, cerebral football player, as is Kirby. Like the fact that he's a ball hawk and he likes to tackle. You can't replace those things. It's hard to find those things. But at what cost, right? I mean, you've got Terrion Arnold that you're grooming, and he's going to be a number one, hopefully be turned into a lockdown man corner. You're probably going to need to draft another one. You're definitely going to need to bring in another free agent, whether it's Carlton or somebody else, to shore up that, that position. You need to have a veteran leader in the room. But my question again is, how much of this last season and last season for Kirby is maybe directly or indirectly related to Brian Branch's play on the field? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm seeing Gary, his comment here in the chat. Man, how much more do we need to see from Kirby? Give the dude some credit. Damn.
Oh, no, I'm giving him all the credit in the world. 1,000%. But 100%. We're having a conversation here on what are we seeing from a team perspective? Is this Kirby? Is this Branch? Is it a combination of the team? I mean, you also have to remember we lost 21 players, 16 players to IR defense. Okay. Who was left on the field? So that's where I would tend to lean towards, okay, Kirby had an excellent season. And with all the injuries on the field, he was still able to play at that level. So is there value here? So I'm going to ask you the question again. Do you feel like any of his work this season is due to Brian Branch?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. It's not taking anything away from Kirby. I think these are just conversations you have to have. Could Brad Holmes find another player and draft him? Again, we're not advocating to get Kirby off the roster by any means. He's an awesome player. We love the guy.
Yeah.
But can you plug and play? You know, I remember it's funny because I look back at even losing like a DeAndre Swift, like, man, I really liked him. I believed in this guy. And then you get Jahmyr Gibbs, and there's always some aspect of it that you haven't considered. It could be even better. Now, again, I'm not necessarily saying that with Kirby Joseph, but absolutely, it's the sum is the greater than the whole of its parts. That whole, you know, kind of thought process there. Could you plug and play somebody where Kirby is right now that you would pay a fraction of the cost? Because it sounds like, for what you're saying, well, if the subject of this conversation was Brian Branch, this would be a no. He is 100%. You have to keep him.
Right. And so John Desage mentions in here that safeties are fairly cheap. Well, I think you're going to find out here in a moment they're not. And especially when they've had a season like Kirby has had. And that's why I spent so much time on this, because I got to be honest, John, I kind of felt the same thing. Like you usually don't hear a whole lot of giant contracts going out to safeties, but there has been a few. And when I started dissecting this, I'm like, this is going to be a problem. Mm-hmm. And here's why. So let's just get into it. Contract implications. So let's take a look at the league and I guess where the position stands right now for contracts. Now, I compiled a list of the top 7 most recent deals for safeties. The average APY, right? The average per year. It's $17.65 million. That is the average for a top 7 safety right now. $32.4 million guaranteed. Now, that's big money when you think about it. Ali McNeil just got $20 million. So that's big money when you look at how many players the Lions need to re-sign. Their own draft picks that they're going to need to re-sign. We can't forget that J-Mo and Hutch are closing in. Jahmyr Gibbs, Laporta, Branch, and Campbell all next year are eligible. And, I mean, it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. You're going to run out of money. At what point do you make a business decision? The question is, what are other teams doing, right? How is it impacting their cap and their roster? Now, I'm going to start with the Bucs. Okay, the Bucs are one of 3 teams that are spending $30 million or more on their safety room. Their safety room right now has 7 players signed in 2025. That's $33.9 million allocated towards their cap, which is a 13.25% cap hit. So 13.25% of the cap number is dedicated to safeties. That's a big number, especially when you look across the league, and most quarterback rooms don't even have 13% of cap allocated. So coming off of his only first team All-Pro season in 2023, only one All-Pro, Antoine Winfield Jr. He paces the safety market at $21 million average per year. He's on a 4-year deal worth $84 million. He just signed it in the spring of 2024. He is making $25 million in 2025. And then you also have Jordan Whitehead on that team. He is the second highest paid on the Bucs at $4.5 million. And then all the other, players that are listed for the Bucs, they average about $1 million a piece. So that's where the affordable or, safeties are cheap, comes in, because you only have 2 safeties on a team that are starting. But it's those first 2 that are going to get paid the most. Between the 2 safeties on the Bucs roster, they're making $30 million. Between 2 safeties, $30 million. But the other 5 are making $5 million combined, roughly. So the next team, the Chargers, they're also one of 3 teams in 2025 spending $30 million or more on their safety room. And that is $32.5 million, which is equivalent to 12.69% of the cap. They have a 4-time Pro Bowler in Derwin James. Remember, 4-time Pro Bowler in Derwin James, who is the next highest paid safety in the league at $19.1 million per year. They also have a Loie Gilman, who is the second highest paid player on the Chargers roster. And all of the other safeties, 2 other safeties, are averaging under $1 million a piece. So again, between their 2 top safeties, their starting safeties, they are spending $30 million on 2 players. It's crazy. Now, the third team that I'm going to talk about here is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, they are the last team currently, before the new cap hits, that are spending $30 million or more in cap in their safety room. They're spending $31.3 million in 2025, or 12.26% of the cap. Now, the three-time All-Pro Minkah Fitzpatrick of the Steelers is the third highest paid safety in the league at $18.4 million per year. You'll remember these 2 names, Miles Kilbrew and Deshaun Elliott, also play for the Steelers, and they make $4.25 and $3.75 million respectively. The fourth guy on the Steelers roster is under $1 million. And then it comes to the Detroit Lions. The Lions have 3 safeties on their active roster, with Lauren Strickland and Eric Hallett signed to futures deals. I'm not really clear on Morris Norris at this point, but we'll just consider these 4. Their total cap hit so far in 2025, take a guess. Without looking, Riley, take a guess. What do you think it is?
Say it again. Sorry, the total cap hit for who?
The Lions. The Lions in their safety room.
30%.
No. It's $7 million.
$7 million. Okay.
Okay. So their 3 safeties on the roster, 4 safeties on the roster is $7 million this year, which is about 2% of the cap. 2%. So now it becomes the question. Well, let's go back to the top 3 that I just listed. Antoine Winfield, he has only had 1 All-Pro season. So is Kirby. After his All-Pro season, he signed the biggest contract of all safeties in the NFL, which averages $21 million a year. He's making $25 million this year. It's an $84 million deal. Okay? The next safety, Derwin James. Now, he's had 4 Pro Bowl bids, no All-Pro, and he's the second highest paid. Remember, Kirby has 1 All-Pro, no Pro Bowls. All-Pro is amazing. That doesn't get any better. And then you have Minkah Fitzpatrick, who has, where's his numbers? 3 All-Pro. 3 All-Pro selections. And he's the third highest paid. So when you look at these guys, you've got Minkah at 18.4. You've got Derwin at 19.1. And you have Antoine Winfield at $21 million. So my next question is, based on the information I've given you so far, where do you think Kirby's deal is going to line up to be?
What he's asking for?
I mean, based on the information that I just gave you, where do you think his deal is going to line up to be?
I mean, if you're Kirby, he's asking for, what do you think, 15 million?
I don't know if you paid attention, Riley. So do you have the sheet in front of you?
No, I can't get it on my computer. That's why I was trying to look this up here, and it's not loading. It was loading on my phone earlier, but not.
All right, here you go. Let me do this. Let me send this to you. So yeah, I thought you were able to follow along. My bad.
No, you're good. I should have said something. I couldn't. That's why I was trying to get it up here on my computer, but because
so it's this simple. You got 3 safeties that all compare and don't compare to Kirby, because Kirby's had 1 All-Pro. So the direct comparison to the 1 All-Pro is going to be Antoine Winfield. He has 1 All-Pro season. Okay, and after he had his All-Pro season, he signed the biggest contract in the NFL for safeties, and that is $21 million a year. Okay, $84 million deal. And then you have Derwin James, who has 4 Pro Bowls, and he's making $19 million. So 21 mil, 19 mil. And then you have Minkah Fitzpatrick, who's a 3-time All-Pro. You would think that he would have the biggest contract in the NFL, and he's making 18.4 mil. So 21, 19, 18.4, Now, where do you think Kirby's deal would line up based on those three numbers?
I would think his agent's starting at 21.
Exactly.
Right.
It won't be any less than that. That's where his number's going to start.
Because of his age, and he's going to say, look, he's going to continue producing at this level. So that's your starting point.
So when you break this down even a little bit further, I can tell you right now, John, if Kirby were to take 3 years, 30 million, I'd sign him yesterday. That is not happening. He might take 30 million over 2 years at the very minimum. It ain't going to happen. Kirby's starting at 22 million a year. I guarantee it. I don't know how it would be any different, especially when you look at what I'm giving you. I'm giving you the exact information that an agent's going to bring to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, this guy has 1 All-Pro and he's making 21 million.
Yep.
This guy has 3 All-Pros and he's making less. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't vet out. It doesn't make sense as to why he's making less, other than he signed his deal probably before Antoine did.
Yep.
Antoine reset the stage. So when you go back and look at the top salaries beyond them, Buda Baker's making 18 million. Xavier McKinney is making 16.75. I can guarantee you this, he's going to want more money than Xavier McKinney. Jesse Bates is making 16 million. Kyle Duggar is making 14.5. Marcus Williams is making 14. Grant Delpit is making 12. Jalen Thompson's making 12. Julian Love, 11. Justin Reed, and then Amani Hooker, and then Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. They absolutely gave him a cheap deal at $9 million. Look, guys and ladies, Lions fans, the writing's on the wall here. If you are going to keep Kirby, he's going to have to get paid through the nose. Here's my opinion and some more supporting evidence, I guess. When I look at the top 3 highest paid safeties, I compared the awards first, right? Because that typically adds the biggest layer of salary component to a player's new deal. I think that Kirby had an exceptional season, and I think that he is going to want to capitalize on it. And his salary of $3.8 million in 2025, well, that's not going to be enough for Kirby to risk 2025 without a new deal. I like Kirby. I think he's an excellent player, but I think he's better than average, right? But I have to say, I'm not always impressed with his single high safety work. Like I said earlier, I think he's a little bit late. I feel he is a bit slow to react in the blended coverages, and just not, it's just not a good look for him. Sometimes he seems like he's lost because he's arriving late. Too many big gash plays when safety's number one job is to limit the big gash plays. Now, he had a stellar PFF grade versus the rest of the guys that I've mentioned. He had the best PFF grade. If you believe in anything in PFF, there you go. My questions to enter this contract negotiation would be, what about Brian Branch in 2026? Because I can tell you right now, Brian Branch is going to be commanding about the same amount of money. How would you pay $45 million a year to 2 safeties? You got to think about that. Do you think that Branch is better than Kirby? Or do you think Kirby is better than Branch? Now, how much is he worth? Over the Cap has estimated his value at $17.372 million. So there's the floor. $17 million. Do we have enough room to add Kirby and Branch? We know that Branch is going to cost whatever Kirby is and probably more. And that is what I'm worried about. So, again, when I compared the records, it's Kirby Joseph has 1 All-Pro, never a Pro Bowl. It's Minkah Fitzpatrick, 5 Pro Bowls, and then named to the Associated Press first team All-Pro 3 times. Kirby does not compare to that. Antoine Winfield, just 1 Pro Bowl and 1 All-Pro. Well, that's better than Kirby Joseph, but that's the best comparison when it comes to awards. And then Derwin James, like I said earlier, selected to 4 Pro Bowls and 4 All-Pros. Again, Kirby does not compare to that. Kirby's stats. He's 97th overall pick of the 3rd round in 2022. Minkah Fitzpatrick was the 11th overall pick for the Dolphins in 2018. Derwin James was the 17th overall pick in 2018. Antoine Winfield was a second round 45th pick. Sounds very familiar to Brian Branch in 2020. So the biggest question is, are Kirby's stats commensurate to these other guys getting paid top dollar? The one thing that we do know is in 2024, Kirby led the league with 9 interceptions. He had 12 passes defensed. He had 58 tackles. He played in 17 games. Played 99% of defensive snaps. He played 23% of special team snaps. He remained fairly healthy, right? Was never removed from a game. When you go and you compare his record and his stats to everybody else, well, let's take a look at Minka. So Minka this last season had 1 interception. He had 4 passes defense to Kirby's 12. He had 1 TFL to Kirby's 1. He had 62 tackles to Kirby's 58. He also played 99% of the snaps. Kirby had a better year than Minka did. Compared to Derwin James. Derwin James had 1 interception to Kirby's 9. He had 7 passes defense to Kirby's 12. He also had 6 quarterback hits to Kirby's 1. He had 10 TFLs to Kirby's 1. And he had 5.5 sacks to Kirby's none. Derwin James is used a little bit differently. He also had 60 tackles and played 90% of the snaps. I would say the Derwin James, if you were to trade sacks for interceptions, they're very similar seasons. Depends on what happened with those sacks. Were they game changers? Did it reset the downs? And then Antoine Winfield, he had 0 interceptions in 24. He only played in 9 games. He had 4 quarterback hits. He had 2 sacks, 34 tackles, only played 47% of the defensive snaps. I would be pissed if I was the Bucs that just paid $21 million to someone that only played 47% of the snaps. But he was also injured half the season. So when I look at their numbers, right, I don't see guys that have these huge interception numbers. None of them do. Minka Fitzpatrick is the only one that has had more than 5 interceptions in a season other than Kirby. He had 6, and that was back in 2022. Kirby's on the rise. Kirby's going to demand a big, big number. So here's my question to everybody in the comments and you, Riley. And, of course, in the chat. If you were offered a 2nd and a 4th round pick for Kirby Joseph, would you take it?
Damn. I was not prepared to have to. I feel like I'm going through it right now, having to think through.
Hold on a second. So Full State Farms, what happened is our stream somehow stopped and then went to my other scheduled event for February 1st. Yeah, the Senior Bowl that we'll still do. We're going to do that on February 1st, but I'm going to be watching the game and then we'll be commenting through it. We're going to be looking for, some playmakers that, we can keep our eye on before we head to the combine. But anyway, so with all of this information that I've given everybody, Kirby is going to command $20 million a year. And the next year, you're going to have to pay Brian Branch $20 million a year. Maybe. Kirby's probably going to sit out. Do you honestly think that Kirby's going to play this season on his paltry, deal comparably to what everyone else is making? I don't think so. I think Kirby's going to sit. If I'm his agent, I'm telling him to sit. And so Brad is going to have a choice here. Before the draft, do you trade Kirby if you're able to get a 2nd and a 4th for Kirby Joseph? I mean, you might even be able to pull a 1st because of the amazing season that he just had and how cheap his contract is. And the team that's going to pick him up is going to renegotiate his contract and give him a big deal. So that's the question in the chat and in the comments below. Do you trade Kirby before the draft and try to get at least a 2nd and a 4th?
Yeah, as you're looking at that, and again, that's powerfully presented. Again, I mean, I saw the rundown, but admittedly, kind of going through this, as you're spelling it out, you have to take the emotion out of it. I mean, so
there you go.
if it's a second and a fourth round pick, and it means you can keep Branch, it's the roster roulette, then yes. The answer would be yes. As tough as that would be, I did not expect to come on the microphone today and say, "Oh yeah, we're trade Kirby." But again, taking everything into context, which is the value that you get on the show here, and thinking it through, yeah, it's a no brainer. You would have to do that, keeping not just the present in mind, but looking at the big picture too. And maybe Brad Holmes drafts a guy that's every bit as impactful.
That's the difference for me and what I try to provide, and what I know Riley will try to provide in his segments that he's going to prepare is there is zero emotion for me, right? I have to separate my fandom of Kirby because I love Kirby. I do not want this dude to go. I don't want him to be another on another football team.
Yeah,
love what he does, love what he represents. I mean, he is the epitome of what we what we do in Detroit. He's exactly what Dan and Brad wanted to build in Detroit. Yeah, it may have taken him a couple of seasons to kind of get rolling, and really step into it. But I think he's a product of the room. And I think the initial room that he joined was terrible. And now the room is starting to get built in a way that these guys can actually play ball. They can do what they're here to do. And I think that being a product of the room is not a bad thing. I think that we're all a little bit of a product of our surroundings until you do something to set yourself apart. And Kirby set himself apart this year, but he also played in a very good room. You had Carlton for the majority of the season. You had Amik for all but one game. You had Terrian for all games. And he was learning, right? Brian Branch, you had every game. I mean, you're talking about some massive ball players here. He obviously had an amazing season, but is it likely to continue? Is it likely to be replicatable? The answer is no. Does that mean he's going to be a bad football player? No. It means that he's going to have a hell of a 2025 season, but it's not going to be 9 interceptions, right? It's just not. And that's the only thing that you can weigh Kirby against anybody else right now is the fact that he had 9 interceptions. What about the rest of his play on the field? Well, I think he's damn good in the run game. I think he did fairly well in the pass game. I mean, his numbers would say differently. His numbers would say that he was damn near elite in the pass game. But for me, if you can get a second round pick in a fourth out of Kirby that you spent a third on in 2022, imagine what Brad can do with a second and a fourth. You could take that second and a fourth, and you could probably move way up in the first round and have 2 picks in the first round. Or you could take that fourth and a third and move into the second round and now have a pick in the first and 2 or 3 picks in the second. You can find Kirby's replacement. You can find another cornerback to add to that room and continue to build it out. You can find your defensive tackle. You can find your edge rusher or 2. You could get an outside linebacker, an edge rusher, and a safety in a defensive tackle with all of those picks. And probably all of them would be able to start this year. And it would make that room, this defense even better with the amount of depth that you're going to have. And then to Riley's point, when he mentioned roster roulette, now your cap number came way down. So for the cost of Kirby, you could now have 4 ball players on your squad that aren't even making $20 million a year. That's the difference. You trade him for a couple of picks, you find his replacement in the draft, and now you have 4 ball players that you selected in the first 2 or 3 rounds that collectively aren't even making $20 million a year. That is how you manage a cap, and that is how you build a team for sustained success, and that is what I think Brad is going to have to weigh. Do I keep you, or do I strike when the ether is hot? And right now, that ether has never been higher for Kirby.
Mm-hmm.
People want him. Teams want him, and they're going to pay for it. Would you rather have a proven vet join your team, or would you rather take a chance on a rook? Well, I think I'd rather take a chance on Brad Holmes' rook. I don't know about any other GM in the league.
Yeah. So I guess that's the question, too, on that is, do you feel a team would offer a second and a fourth, knowing that they also then have to renegotiate and then pay what's inevitably going to be a higher price tag for Kirby? Do you think somebody would offer a second and a fourth?
I think it's viable. I think there's another good, J-Rod said something in here too that, maybe then you re-sign Iffy. You bring in a guy that had a little bit of injury issue this year.
Mm-hmm.
But last year when he stepped in, the last 4, 5, 6 games of the year, he pulled down 4 interceptions. He was getting like an interception a game for a minute there. So maybe, you re-sign Iffy to a cheap deal, $4 or $5 million a year. Branch, you'll be able to re-sign next year. You bring in a rookie this year that'll be ready to go. He'll be able to contribute. But maybe the backfield is now Iffy and Branch for 2025. And if you are able to, finagle a deal and maybe you end up getting a player in return or something, who knows? Maybe it's a second in a player. Maybe it's a third in a player. Maybe it's a third and a fourth. Maybe it's just a third. But I would say that the pick, in my opinion, is going to outweigh Kirby's ability on the field. And then I also think you have to look at, and I know that I doubt the GMs think about this. Maybe it's just the way my brain works. But if Kirby's targeted, by the NFL for the way that he's hit players, well, maybe you want to remove that liability. Branch is targeted already. Can't have 2 players that are targeted by the refs on the defense. So maybe you have to move on from one just so that you can kind of, rinse the room a little bit and try to get some of that interjection by the ref out of the game. I don't think that Kirby really had a bunch of penalties this year, though. Did he? He had that one in the divisional round for pass interference, cheap penalty, but
yeah, he wasn't flagged a ton. But yeah, it's and Gary makes a good comment here. Do we have years to develop players, or do we want to strike while the iron's hot? That's the question that Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell, that they're going to have to make. That's exactly what Will's saying here.
With that, though, I mean, let's think about it. Are we any less in the hunt for a Super Bowl without Kirby?
That's a great question.
If you have Branch back there and you have Iffy, you bring Iffy back. Terrian in his second season. Amik will be back. He's already signed. So I think it's really who you add as your number one corner. If you're going to bring in another proven vet or Carlton Davis, you bring him back.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where it makes a difference, because if you're going to be in a lot of single high safety anyway, well, Brian Branch is your answer. So does it really matter? I don't know. I'd rather see him in 2 high safety, to be honest with you. More often.
Yeah. You look at Terrion Arnold, he didn't have an interception this whole year.
Right.
I imagine he's got to at least get 1 or 2 next year, right? So if you took those away from Branch or from Kirby, I think that's kind of what you're saying. You've done a hell of a job painting a picture that he's a great player. We all know how much you love Kirby Joseph, but is there more value in him as an asset versus what you're getting on the field?
It's always going to be a risk. It's a risk of paying a player $20 million a year and him not going out the next season and getting injured, right? It's paying him $20 million a year and he goes out in the next season and completely shits the bed and has a terrible year. And then you find out, damn, that was a complete outlier in 2024. Kirby wasn't the player that we thought he was going to be, and we just paid him $100 million. Now what? We could have gotten a 3rd round pick for him or a 2nd round pick for him. Now what? You're stuck. So I think that smart teams and smart GMs, they do things similarly. And I think that is they maximize their contracts, but they also maximize their assets and their draft capital.
Yep.
You have to. If you know that you have a hot commodity right now on your team that isn't costing you anything, because Kirby's deal is what, 3.4, whatever it was this year. It's a very small number. And for you to ship him off to another team and you're getting a damn good draft pick in return, it only makes sense. So if we were to go through, the top free agents right now, Javon Holland is the top 3 as far as PFF considers Javon Holland safety out of Miami Dolphins. Compared to Jesse Bates, he had a 76.1 coverage grade with no pressure. He had a 75 coverage grade on throws less than or equal to 3 seconds. He had a forced incompletion rate of 11.3%. His run defense grade is 82.8. So then there's the question. I mean, is this a player that you would try to bring in? No, because I think that you're probably going to look at, he's a second-round pick out of Oregon in 2021. You're kind of lining that same thing up as far as how much is he going to be asking for.
Mm-hmm.
It could be the same amount. Now, that wouldn't make any sense. You wouldn't want to bring in another player that you would have paid the same amount of money for if had you just kept Kirby. I don't think that makes any sense at all, unless you think that that player is, a leg up. So here's the last part of this, and the reason why I brought this up. I know a lot of fans want an edge rusher. And I know a lot of people think, for whatever reason, that the only way we're going to win football games is if we have Max Crosby or Myles Garrett across from Aiden Hutchinson. I will tell you emphatically that is wrong. That is my opinion. It's 1,000% wrong. But this is how you get your edge rusher. If you get rid of Kirby and you get a draft pick, not only could you draft an edge rusher or draft Kirby's replacement, but you just saved $20 million this year potentially. Well, the number would probably not hit until 26 if they did an extension. But you could work the numbers to now, Khalil Mack is a free agent. You could bring in Khalil Mack. He's way on the other side of prime. You could trade for a Kirby and Max Crosby deal. You could make that trade to where maybe you're not giving up a bunch of first round picks to the Raiders. Now you're giving up Kirby, and maybe you're giving up a second round pick to bring in Max Crosby. That's more viable. That's not F them picks.
Yep.
But what did you just do, though? You just traded out one really good player on the back end for a speed rusher. Well, you better be able to get to the quarterback. That's all I'm saying. Because if you don't have your ball hawk on the back end, doesn't matter if you're rushing the quarterback in under 2.5 seconds if the ball's coming out and you've got nobody to defend it. Josh Sweat, edge, Philadelphia Eagles. He's going to be a free agent. He's going to be in the Super Bowl. He's going to want a ton of money. How about, Hassan Reddick? He's going to be another free agent. I'm not really sold on Hassan Reddick. Never have been. Who else? You got Dre Greenlaw, linebacker. We do need a linebacker. I'm just going through. So Carlton Davis is listed as the top 21 free agent this year. You've got Teleona Funga from the San Francisco 49ers. He's been a pretty solid player. So he's a safety that's available. Let's see, other edge rushers.
It's awesome to see the chat here because it's funny to see a lot of the comments and the wave, because it seems like now people are kind of coming around to seeing the picture that you're painting. And and I'll admit too, I'm learning a lot too on the fly here. It's a lot to kind of process because until Will really even presented this, I hadn't thought that far ahead. I'm just looking at this season for what it was, looking at next season. But that's the benefit of having these conversations, is having not just a picture for right now, but understanding what could come. So if all of a sudden you got a report or a notification that the Lions had traded Kirby Joseph, the initial reaction is going to be, why the hell are they trading Kirby Joseph? But if that happens, you're going to remember this conversation and have it provide some context, and it's going to make a lot more sense. If it happens,
I hope I can provide some context.
Absolutely.
But so then you have Minnesota Vikings cornerback Byron Murphy. You also have Cameron Bynum. They both played exceptionally well in Minnesota, even though we were able to kind of work our way on them. Um, again, they're available. What is their contract going to look like? Now, would you be bringing in another guy and you just trade in the same amount of money for a different name on the back of a jersey? I don't think that that's a smart move unless you really believe that Bynum is a better player. Then yeah, it is smart. But Byron Murphy Jr., we do need a corner, but he just signed a 2-year, $17.5 million contract, free agent contract with the Vikings in 2023. So that amount of money, $8 million, $9 million a year, that's not a ton of money for a corner, especially with what he's been able to do on the field. As far as Cameron Bynum, I think that he made, $10 million this year or $12 million or something like that. I don't think it was a big amount of money. So again, you could bring in a guy and save, half the money that you would have spent on Kirby. Now, again, I'm going to say it again. I'm not wanting Kirby to go elsewhere. I'm just painting the picture and having the conversation. We're going to do that a lot between now and the draft because this is what it's all about right now. It is draft rumor, trade rumor, but I do it a little bit differently, right? I'm not just going to say that, the Lions are thinking about trading Kirby Joseph. No, I'm going to say that this is what would happen if, or this is what can happen if. And let's vet it out. Let's walk through it. Let's put all the information out there and have a conversation. I'm not just going to do clickbait like a lot of other people do, or just talk about the same player over. 50 times a year, I hear something about Max Crosby, or Myles Garrett from the same people. And it's just like, come on. Is there anything else we can talk about? Or Chase Young. Chase Young's going to be a free agent again this year. He's been a free agent often, it seems like. Justin Reed from the Kansas City Chiefs. He's going to be a free agent. He signed a 3-year deal. Oh, let me see here. Budda Baker had an extension this year of 3 years, $54 million. Now, if the Lions were able to do something like that for Kirby, it's still $18 million a year, but it's not 25. It's not 22. It's getting closer. The biggest thing to all of this is, can you get out of the contract if they do extend him? What is your out after the first year? Can you get out of the contract in 27 and still be able to recoup some of your money? That is the biggest thing that I would look forward to in a contract for Kirby. How about Azeez Ojulari, New York Giants? Now, he's someone that we talked about this year too, right when we were talking about Zadarius Smith, that Azeez Ojulari could have been a good option for the Lions to bring in. Now, he had just 22 pressures in 2024. He did not have a great season in New York, but I think that that's a product of New York and Giants football. I don't think that that's, an indictment on the player itself. I think that he's a product of his surrounding. How about Calais Campbell? I got to imagine that he's about ready to retire. Or there's Harrison Smith from the Vikings, safety. He's 35 years old this year, though. He's still thumping. He's still a hell of a hitter. He's had 35 interceptions, 20 sacks, and over 100 passes defensed and 50 tackles for loss in his career. DeMarcus Lawrence from the Cowboys, another edge rusher that's available. So there's plenty of options, I guess is what I'm saying. I'd rather see the Lions get a pick, but I'm not saying that that's the end all be all. We're at the 10 o'clock hour, Riley. Is there anything you want to share with anybody today or share with everybody today? Is there any other topics you want to talk about? I know you had a couple of things.
No, I think that's a great point today. I think that was a great discussion, a lot of thought. Yeah, I think it's a great kind of stopping point there, at least on my end.
Okay. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts after this, especially in the comments. Am I crazy to think that the Lions could be better off trying to get a pick here or two? Strike when the iron's hot, right? Strike when the ether's high, and maintain your cap. It's time to play roster roulette. You're going to roll the dice. But at the end of the day, I trust Brad Holmes in the draft. Nobody wanted Kirby Joseph. Remember that? Nobody knew who he was. And like Brad Holmes says, don't judge my players. Don't evaluate my players for at least 3 seasons. Well, this was the 3rd season for Kirby. It was his best season yet. And that is why of course, I would love to see him stick around. But again, we have to remember that this is not Madden. This is a business. They're playing a game that we love, but it's a business. And at the end of the day, the business has to make money. The business has to print tickets and sell seats and put seats, butts in seats, right? They have to sell millions of pounds of popcorn. Well, the only way you're going to do that is if you have a good product on the field. You can't have a good product on the field if you don't have any money to spend. And if you don't have any money to spend, it's because you gave everybody and their brother a nice big contract. You can't do that either. At some point, you have to cut bait, move forward, and reestablish that position as best you can. And I think that Brad Holmes in the draft can do that. But Kirby, I absolutely love you, dude. I don't want to see you going anywhere. But if it happens, I understand why. I understand what Brad's thinking, I think. Or I hope. I understand what he's thinking is do what's best for the team. Get as much compensation as you can, for a player that possibly could be replaced. You have Brian Branch. I mean, what's better than that? I don't think anything. So, all right. You guys have a wonderful day. We'll catch you guys back tomorrow. And what's this? Tyler Conklin is shooting in my bow league this week. I don't even know what a bow league is. But anyway, we'll see you guys back tomorrow morning on the Rise and Grind Morning Show. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the conversation. I know it's a long segment. We didn't even get to 30% of all the stuff that we were going to talk about today. So we'll get into more of it tomorrow morning. We'll see you guys. Take care. Go and probably go Detroitlions. Riley, have a good afternoon.
You as well. Thanks, Will.
Bye-bye.
Shout. Tune in till the energy ignites. Rise and grind, take flight. Each play, each kick, we feel alive. Echoes in the city as the fans arrive. Heart of the motor in the screen. We're bound together by a football dream. Rise and grind, Detroit's calling out. Football dreams in every shout. Tune in, feel the energy.